Hello and welcome to this new video. It's a pleasure for me to see you here and what we are talking about today. Today we are talking about secure coding practices, and this with a focus on web application. So if you're interested in this and you like this security context for your applications, then you're exactly right here now. By the way, my name is Sven Ruppert. I'm developer advocate for JFrog and mostly running around in the German woods, but right now I'm on a longer hiking trip here in the Swedish woods. So if you want to see a little bit from the Swedish woods and you want to know a little bit more about secure coding practices, then a big welcome from my side. By the way, if you're the first time here on my channel, thank you very much that you're found the way here to my channel, and it's a pleasure for me to see you. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe my channel, please. So enough of the words, let's start. Okay, now let's talk about different steps to secure your web app. And one of the first things you should have an eye on is all input data. Input data, you can more or less build two categories. It's trusted and untrusted data. And trusted data is everything what you're handling inside your own server. Untrusted is everything that's coming from outside. So outside doesn't mean from outside of the world, so from the internet. It could be from other server inside your environment, inside your closed service as well. So good guideline is all data that is coming from database, all files that are coming from outside, these are all data inputs or inputs that are you have to check definitely if everything is right. So, but if you have just data in terms of text, make sure that if you're deciding to use UTF-8, then that is just UTF-8. And inside UTF-8, that you're just reducing to the characters you really need. So input type, input value, data ranges, all this stuff. Make sure that you are excluding all these characters that have not only invisible ASCII interpretation for us as a human, but all these characters that can, for example, shift the reading of a parser from left to right to left, or whatever. So all this stuff, make sure that you are really narrowing it down to the data you really want and check everything that's coming from inside. Okay, we spoke about how to make sure that nothing is coming into the system, but the most people are forgetting in the same way to harden the stuff or to clean up the stuff that's going out of your system. So if you're pushing data out, so if you're generating something output, it could be HTML or text or whatever, make sure that you have only this stuff inside this stream or data block that is valid. For example, check if there is a hidden command of system operating commands or whatever, and clean them, kill them, just don't let them out. Yeah? So it means everything in SQL, system calls, characters with special meanings, all this stuff, clean it and then give it out. The same with binaries. If you have binaries with specific behavior or possibilities, clean them. So if you're pushing out a PDF, make sure that this PDF really just contains the data you want to have there and not additional stuff inside the header or whatever. So now we are talking about authentication and password management. This is a huge topic and I'm not able to cover all of this for sure. That's just an overview video. But there are a few common things that are mostly not done right, or I see them so often implemented wrong. For example, source code is not a good place for credentials, passwords, and so on and so on. And I see it quite often that we have access keys or generic passwords and all this stuff in code. So nothing of this should be inside source code. The next thing is, if you're using hash implementations, make sure that you're using trusted implementations of this hash algorithms and that this hashing is done inside a trusted environment. And so that's not that you're not able to compromise this one. Another thing that is mostly not done right is during the initialization or during this authentication process, sometimes other resources are allocated already that are used after positive authentication, but this is not good. So it really divide it in a way that first just the authentication, and if this is positive, start allocating resources. Deallocating resources means that if something is going wrong with this authentication, make sure that this is really done in a structured and secured way, so that you are not having open resources or whatever left over that can be misused or an accidentally created session. So altogether, make sure that you are aware of this common stuff, but be prepared. This authentication and password management is not a trivial thing. Okay, the next thing that is important after authentication and password management is the session handling itself, and both are interacting quite well, or they're very tight bound together. It means session management. If you are creating a session, make sure that you are closing the session as soon as possible, and this can have several things. For example, for convenience, mostly sessions will get from the user experience point of view the longest possible timeout, but a long possible timeout is exactly the opposite what you want to have a secure application. The second thing is that you should make sure that a user with the same login can log in at this session or the system just once at the same time, not multiple times. On the other side, this whole authentication and access management should be with the following characteristics. So if you have an authentication process, make sure that, if possible, the session will be created after a successful login. If it is necessary, because the framework just needs it or just doing it, make sure even if this authentication is process is not positive, then that you are really destroying the session. The session IDs, the session identifiers, should be unique in a way that you can't predict what is the next session ID, and it shouldn't be part of URLs or whatever, so that it's not visible. On the other side, if you're dealing with sessions, make sure that everything that's stored inside the session, for example, reference to other systems, variables and all this stuff, is really disconnected and terminated after the session is not used anymore. So session handling itself is mostly hidden by the framework you're using, but you should be aware of all this stuff so that you can check how this is done and how the session handling is really implemented. And one important thing as a last note is, if you have an area where you need access, make sure that on every single site, in every single section you are inside this logged in environment, you have the possibility to log out. This is so often forgotten, and then people are just closing the browser. Okay, next topic is access control. Access control, mostly you know it under role-based access. Also, you have groups and rights, and then you can deal with different resources. And so one thing is that you should be aware of, that this access should be at least the bare minimum what you really need. So deny everything and then step by step increase things or the roles and rights so that the user just can do what is necessary. On the other side, mostly it's forgotten that access control will have a temporal component. So for example, if I don't use my access to several resources, it makes sense to reduce this access because he's not requesting, is not using it. It's the same with the users itself. So if you have users after, let's say, 10 days, 15 days of being inactive, shut down the system, remove the access, reduce the level that can be accessed. So in total, what does it mean? Access control should be very, very fine-grained so that you really can activate, deactivate things. It should be the minimum that really is necessary. Log all activities in terms of what rules are triggered or used by a user and really is needed. And then all the time, make sure that stuff is deactivated if it is not used frequently. Okay, next thing that's very important is error handling and logging. And error handling itself means that every time if there's an error, an exception or whatever, make sure that the system is not completely blown up or resources are not just lying around without being destroyed or decommissioned. On the other side, here in mid-2022, we are aware of what happened with logging. Log4j shell was a very hard thing for us, and it showed us that even logging frameworks can lead to remote code execution and other things. But for you as a developer, what should you do? So in terms of logging, make sure that you're logging a lot of stuff for sure, so that you know what is going on. On the other side, make sure that you're not pushing data or sensitive data out of the system, so that nothing can bleed out. One thing, for example, if you have access to the log files of your own session or whatever, and you have some input fields, and you know you can provide some errors with invalid data or whatever, you can try to sneak in with your input commands with templating elements, so that you try to read environment variables from the server. And quite often it's possible with this attack to extract sensitive data like API keys, session tokens, whatever, so different secure relevant information through logging, so that someone who has access to the log files can read it. So everything, what you should do is log a lot, log everything, all errors, all mistakes, all whatever, but make sure that the combination of information that you're pushing through this logging engine is sanitized in a way that you're not able to misuse templating stuff, and make sure that no secure relevant or security relevant data is bleeding out of the system via logs. So the next topic is under the umbrella data protection. Data protection means in this context that you should be aware of everything that is sensitive through this application itself. For example, if you have documentation or if you have source code, make sure that you're removing all security relevant or critical information, so that this can't be misused. A developer tends to write more specific things down, but if this is public available documentation or for third parties available documentation, make sure that you are really cleaning all this stuff out, so that this can't be used to attack your system. On the other side, all data that's lying around means if you are storing something in the database like passwords, make sure that they hashed instead of using the plain passwords or stuff like this. On the other side, most people forgetting to encrypt data that is in temporal files. So if you're storing in temporal files or whatever, make sure that this data is protected as well, so encrypted, so that nobody can use this data or accidentally read this data and restore the data structure and extracting the information. On the other side, we are more and more in cloud environments, and sometimes it makes sense so that even inside the memory, if you're storing this stuff, that you are storing it encrypted instead of plain, and make sure that all this information that is sensitive is somehow protected, and especially if it is pushed to disk, if it is sent over the wire, if it is stored inside databases or whatever you're using as persistence layer. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about communication, and here what I want to mention is that communication should be encrypted all the time. So it means if the most people are aware of if there's an end user and connecting to my web service, that this should be encrypted. That's one thing. On the other side, if you're connecting to a database or an internal system, it makes sense to encrypt this environment or this communication as well, because a lot of attacks are from inside the company. It means if there is an unencrypted channel between two components, you can sneak in, you can read, you can have all this information that is transferred from A to B. You can compromise it, you can read it, whatever. So it means check out for the principle zero trust environment. So it's more or less don't trust other environment nodes or other nodes inside your own environment, and then make sure that all communication is encrypted. All communication will have a secure handshake as well. Talking about configuration or system configuration means that we are all aware that configuration should be maintained, and we should close all non-used ports, and we have to deactivate all functionalities we don't need. So this is mostly the case, what you should do. So just remove functionality as much as possible. On the other side, what the most people are forgetting is that a configuration is the same as source code. It should be in a code version server, like a Git server or something like this. And on the other side, all changes at this configuration or that is done should be ordered by a review. So always have this 4 eyes principle. So one is coding, or you have pair programming and coding together this changes, or make sure that all changes in the configuration will be reviewed somehow before it's activated on any production system. Okay, let's talk about file management. File management is quite often used in web application because you have to upload something, you have to download something, and here it makes sense to have some basic rules for files. So for example, if you're storing data somewhere, or if you're accepting data, just accept data from authorized users so that you exactly know who is this user, what are the limits for this user. The next thing is that you have a dedicated place for this file so that you're not storing it in the same environment or in the same area where the application is running, so that you can't upload endless files to reduce the functionality of this application. On the other side, if you're accepting dedicated file types like JPEGs or PDFs or whatever, make sure that you're not only checking the file extension, check the whole file if this is a valid JPEG, if this is a valid PDF or whatever. So make sure that you are deactivating execution rights inside this area where you can store these files, and a very important thing is reduce the possibility to reach system relevant partitions. So for example, don't allow reading etc password db or whatever. So make sure that you have really a dedicated space, not on the same environment, or not in the same space where the application is running. Make sure that you have a dedicated user. Make sure that you exactly know what file type is there. Check this for viruses, worms, cryptominers, and all this stuff. And yeah, that's more or less the basic rule how to deal with files inside web applications. Okay, so many topics we had already, and every topic I discuss here is just an overview, so every topic itself is a huge topic. So I think it makes sense to have for every dedicated topic a separate video, because the amount of topics or the amount of content in each of the sections is big and very relevant for you as a developer. So if you have any preference, or if you have additional topics you want to have discussed, write it down in the comments. It would be very helpful for me to prioritize what is the next important topic for you as my subscriber. By the way, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and if you're not a subscriber already, it would be a pleasure for me to see you as my new subscriber, so that you get information every time I'm publishing a new video. But whatever you're doing with this secure coding stuff, have in mind, if you're in making sure that your own stuff is secure, then make sure that all third-party components are secure as well. So use in combination to all the secure coding practices, vulnerability scanners, so that you can scan for vulnerabilities and malicious packages. And if you're familiar with the JFrog family, then the combination Artifactory and X-Ray will help you a lot. So if you want to try it out, give me a ping via Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, whatever, and give me some ideas what I should cover as next. And otherwise, whatever day and time you're watching this one, enjoy the rest of the day. I will now go somewhere here, so through the Swedish woods again. The day is mostly done, so I will try to find a way back to my camp, and then I will just, do nothing for the rest of the day. I will be lazy. But thank you for watching. It was a pleasure for me to have you here, and stay safe and see you.